All right. Well, we might get started now. We've still got a few people to come in, but we've got a lot to get through. So thank you so much for everyone for attending. The purposes of today is, we've got a lot of members on the LawPath network, members, friends of members and the like, who have reached out to us wanting to get a bit more clarity around what support is available for their business. And so, there's been a lot that's been spoken about in the news and the media about the different grants and support available. And sometimes it's quite a difficult thing to try to work your way through when you're trying to manage, all of the different staffing issues and different considerations that come with downturns and lockdowns and everything else, then trying to work out how to go about getting the best assistance. So the aim of today is to try to point you into the right direction, check if you're eligible for what styles of support, and then the best actions to take to get you the maximum return that you can. So most of us have already should be across what we do at LawPath, but just very quickly, for those of us who are new, I know a lot of people have joined through this via social networks and the like. So LawPath, we're a legal technology provider, really aiming to help small businesses get the legal protection that they need, and we do that in a number of ways. We've got an end-to-end contract management system, on-demand legal advice, and can help with any kind of registration that your business might need around companies, trademarks, business names, everything else in between. And we handle this all in one really easy to use platform. And, we're really proud of how we've been able to help businesses, particularly over the last, 12 to 18 months. And to date, we've helped over 200,000 businesses saving in excess of $100 million in legal fees. So hopefully from today, we can help with a bit more in the way of getting you what you're going to need. If you want to go to the next slide.
Yep.
Oh, back one, sorry, Pat. So in terms of how we can help, we've just got a few things we wanted to bring up before I pass over to Pat from POP, who's going to be our presenter for today. So we have a dedicated COVID-19 resources hub where we keep all of our different resources that we're adding around helping out with support. There's guides in there, there's any kind of webinars, any kinds of presentations, any new documents that are coming out. We try to keep an up-to-date piece on helping you out with all of the different considerations that businesses are going to need through lockdown and the like. We also have a plan which offers on-demand legal advice, which is a plan that gets, it's very busy at the moment with a lot of questions being asked around, different employment considerations, leasing considerations, debt collection and the like. I recommend if anyone's having a look and wanting more in the way of legal assistance, check out our legal advice plan to see if it's going to be something that's going to be suitable for your business and getting those legal questions answered. And for those of us who are new to LawPath, you can sign up for LawPath and get access to your first document for free. We have over 300 legal documents available for you to be able to try. A lot of businesses at this stage are looking at things like remote work policies. They're looking at employment contracts. We've got all of those available for you. So check out our legal documents page and see if you can find a suitable piece for you. And with that all done, I will now pass on to Pat, who's going to be taking us through the presentation today. Pat, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. That was a good introduction. So just a disclosure to get started. So the information here is general in nature and it's meant to be informative. Doesn't constitute financial advice, and we do wish for you to engage with POP or LawPath or an independent expert should you have any questions. So I'm the CEO of POP. We're a chartered accounting firm. We service businesses right across Australia, and we're really focused on helping people build their dream business, and that also includes helping people in times like this, so get the stimulus and the information they need to proceed with their business. So there's 3 grants that have come out so far, and it's been the New South Wales government that initially, and they've now since teamed up with the federal government. We're going to be focusing today on the COVID-19 business grant. The reason being that one is now available since yesterday. I don't think many people have been able to apply because their site is not handling the volume very well. But this grant is available now, and basically what it's doing is it's a one-off cash flow boost payment. and there'll be further grants coming towards the end of the month, which will be a lot sort of bigger in size, most likely. So this is kind of a, to pump some cash into small businesses as quickly as they can. So we're going to run through the eligibility for this, the criteria. As I said, applications are now open. It runs till the 13th of September. And if your business is affected by this latest lockdown and you operate in New South Wales, then you may be eligible. So it's definitely worth listening on. If you have any questions throughout, please jump on the chat. I probably will cover most of your questions, but if you have questions specific to the slide that I'm talking about, it would be really useful to jump on. We do have questions at the end, but I want to make this as engaging as possible, and hopefully we can help as many people and, you know, cover off as many situations as we can throughout. So with this one-off grant, there's 3 tiers. So tier 1 is 7.5K, tier 2 is 10.5K, tier 3 is 15K. And the tiers are dependent upon the decline in turnover. So how significantly has your business been affected by this latest lockdown? And so as you can see, if you've experienced a decline in turnover of 30% or more, you may be eligible for 7.5K. If you've had a 50% decline, 10.5K, and 70% decline, you may be eligible for a 15K. So what we're going to go through today is, what's this mean? What's the decline in turnover? What's the test periods? And then we'll try and cover off on some unique situations that this, you know, that the information released by Service New South Wales doesn't cover yet. Couple of notes: only 1 grant is available per ABN, and multiple businesses under a single ABN are only eligible for 1 grant. Okay, so the initial criteria is you do need to have an ABN, and you do need to have been operating in New South Wales as at 1 June 2021. You need to have had wages of $10 million or less as at 1 July 2020. You need to have an aggregated turnover between 75K and 50 mil. So that one's really important. And it is for the year ended 30 June 2020. So if during the year 2020 you had 75K in sales, you'll most likely satisfy this one. If you didn't, if you're a new business, we'll cover through some of that later. And there's also a couple of other tests whereby if this wasn't a good you know, year to use, you may be able to use a different year. You also need to have business costs for which there's no government support available. Another key one is you need to maintain your current employee headcount as at 13th of July. So if you're letting people go because of the latest lockdown, you may be ineligible. I'll touch on that. And you need to have experienced the decline in turnover. The test period is 26th of June to the 17th of July, and it needs to be for the same period back in 2019. So we're going back 2 years to 2019 to check the decline in turnover test. There are some variances in that one, which I'll touch on, but that's the general outline that they've provided. A key question: can sole traders and non-employing businesses apply? Yes. So if you're a sole trader and you don't employ people, if you do match this criteria and you did have 75K in sales at 30 June 2020, you are affected by the downturn. You can show that you've had a decline in turnover. You've got your ABN. You're operating in New South Wales. You may still be eligible. It's specific how it can be used. So you need to, it's pretty general, to be honest, and it's pretty broad, but it does need to be used. You know, you need to use the funds within the business is what they're saying. And you do need to keep the receipts and the evidence that you have spent the grant on these activities. So basically business expenses for a period of 5 years. So I'll just run through a quick eligibility test, and this is pretty simple from the respect of It's not going to cover off everyone, but this is the general guidelines that they've provided. So it's basically the period that it covers is the 26th of June to the 17th of July. Now, it used to be the 26th of July. They've changed that last night. I believe they may have had some people putting the test period past today, and we don't know if they're going to get sales past then. So they've changed it and put it to 17th of July. So it's basically any 2-week period within that compared to a 2-week period in 2019, and it needs to be the same dates. So as an example below, if you had sales from the 27th of June 2019 to the 10th of July 2019 of 10,000, and sales of on the 27th of June 2021 to the 10th of July 2021 of 2K, you've had a decline in turnover of $8,000. That represents an 80% decline in turnover. So you may be eligible for the $15,000. So this is the most simplest way of looking at it. So you're basically comparing a 2-week period since they announced the lockdown measures compared to 2019. Now, there are some that they've picked 2019, I believe, because last year was COVID and the businesses were significantly affected at that time. So I think they've considered that it might not have been suitable to use that as a test period. But there are some exceptions regarding the test period, which we'll cover over. One other thing to note, if you're a southern border business, so if you border Victoria, your test period you can use is longer. So you can choose from the 27th of May to the 17th of July for your 2-week turnover period. So basically what you're trying to do with this scenario is you're trying to find the highest revenue for a 2-week period and the lowest revenue for a 2-week period from 2019 between these dates to 2020 between these dates. It needs to be the same period as I noted. So you're trying to find where's the highest decline in turnover, given it's the 3 tiers. So the higher the decline in turnover, the bigger the grant's going to be. By allowing a longer period for these businesses, they were impacted for a longer period. So they get to choose a 2-week period for a longer period where they might have had a higher sales a couple of years ago and a lower sales anytime within here. So that might potentially assist them with getting the funds they need. We've provided a link for the towns that satisfy the highly impacted areas for the southern border businesses. So you can click on the link after this. We'll share the slides and you can check if your business is within that to see if you get the 27th of May or if you're just an impacted business, but by the current lockdown and you weren't within lockdown around May. So there's some other eligibility requirements. You need to submit evidence that you have achieved the minimum $75,000. So that can be in the form of, if you're a sole trader, it might be a notice of assessment because you lodge your personal tax return has your sole trader income and information in it. If you're a business, you don't get a notice of assessment, so you'll provide your business tax return. You may also provide business activity statements to show that you have had the 75K in sales for the financial year ended 30 June 2020. The definition of turnover. So if you've had, it's basically done on the same concepts as GST. So it's your GST turnover. I believe if you're registered under a cash basis, you'd use the cash method to determine your revenue and vice versa. Aggregated turnover is just the turnover within that ABN related entity. And we're getting quite a lot of questions around this. So what if 2019 is not a good test period to use for your business? This is the only information they've released on this, and we have reached out to Service New South Wales. They are saying potentially, yes, you can still apply and get it if 2019 is not a good test period to use. I think the main thing is the 75K. If you've had the 75K in sales and you've been affected negatively by this latest lockdown, I believe you can still be eligible. However, within the form, it's very specific around the questions and it has the dates and you answer yes or no, which I'll touch on later. So I'm not 100% around if 2019 isn't a good test period, how you do it within the form. But based on clause 5.7, it says, if you weren't operating the full year, e.g. you're a new business, but you can demonstrate income consistent with 75K per year, and you can demonstrate you've been significantly impacted, you may still be eligible. So I believe if you're a new business, this clause is basically saying, hey, as long as you've hit the 75K and you're negatively impacted, you should still be eligible. At the moment, it's asking them, you're getting asked to contact Service New South Wales because the form is specific and it says to 30 June 2020. If you put, no, I didn't hit 75K in sales for this financial year, it doesn't let you go any further. So we're seeking clarification around that, and we feel like it probably will get updated because it's probably affecting a lot of people that probably are eligible, but the form is not allowing them to continue if they say no at that point. However, this clause is saying that you may still be eligible. So that's for new businesses. It may also be that your turnover was not representative of your usual turnover. As an example, maybe you're affected by the bushfires, or maybe you had some other sort of reasoning as to why this period is really bad for you to test, because you could have had a fluctuation and you may have taken time off from your business, and during that period sales were down, but you're well over 75 usually. So look, there's going to be, where 2019 isn't a good test period, they've basically said here that they will be granting some exceptions to that, but they haven't released what those exceptions really look like, and they haven't advised how within the form you fill it out, because it is really specific within the form regarding the dates, etc. So we're seeking clarification around that, and we should have some more information shortly. One of the key other points is you need to maintain your employment levels from the 13th of July. So basically what that means is you need to keep that employee and employer relationship. It needs to be consistent with employment law. If someone voluntarily resigns, then that's okay. You may still, you can still pass this test. A key thing to note is LawPath is hosting a webinar tomorrow at 12 p.m. to discuss exactly this. So if you have any questions specific to your employees, and you might have some scenarios where there may have been some reasons for hours changing and stuff like that, to make sure you're satisfying the employment law test, please watch that and get in touch. The reason this one's so important is because the upcoming grant, the job savings grant, which I'll touch on later, you do need to satisfy this to get that grant as well. And for this grant, it basically says you do need to satisfy this maintain eligible employees for the period of this grant and the job savings grant. So it's very clear. It doesn't say or, it says and. So you're going to maintain your employment levels even for this grant. So strongly recommend you watch that tomorrow, and you reach out if you need further information specific to your circumstances for your employees. Total wages, so this needs to be less than $10 million. It's based on the Payroll Tax Act, so that might include some subcontractors, etc. So if your wages are close to the 10 mil, it might be worth definitely get some advice on that. Most people will be below the 10 mil, so that they should satisfy that test. There's a highly impacted industries list. To be honest, I haven't seen much difference between that and non-highly impacted industries. They have the exact same criteria for the most part. So if you're not in one of these highly impacted industries, you can still get the same grant so long as you pass the criteria. Supporting evidence. So you will need to provide an accountant's letter showing that you've had the decline in revenue, and it will specify the exact dates for the test period. So back in 2019, between 2nd of July to the 16th of July, it'll show the revenue, and then it'll do the current year, and then it'll include the exact decline in revenue. There'll also be a few declarations made within that form regarding maintaining your eligible employees and satisfying some of the other requirements. So this is what the form looks like. It's really simple. It's got a few questions. It's basically saying, have you satisfied the 75K test and you're less than 50 mil in sales? Were your wages less than 10 mil? Do you have costs that aren't covered by other grants? And will your business maintain the current employee headcount? It also says this is where you do your tests. So you put in your revenue for the current year, revenue for the same period 2 years ago, and below that it'll work out the percentage that you'll need to, it'll show the decline in turnover percentage. Following on from that, you'll need to submit evidence of the 75K. So that will be the tax return, the notice of assessment, or the business activity statements. And then you'll also need to upload the accountant's letter specifying the decline in turnover periods, the amounts, and the percentages, etc. I've kind of gone through that pretty quick. Were there any questions, Tom, coming up in the chat from those initial slides so far, or should we
Probably
keep going?
one of the big common areas that we're getting, Pat, that might be worth just reiterating is around businesses that have started beyond June of 2020.
Yep.
And what support would be available to them. We're getting a lot of questions of businesses that were due to start trading prior to this lockdown happening and actually haven't been able to show any turnover as well. So I don't know if there's any clarification that you can provide there.
So I believe for those businesses, I think they're pretty firm on the 75K. So if you are a new business and new businesses and you haven't met that 75K in sales, I believe, unfortunately, you probably won't be eligible for this grant. But there is other grants coming up that you may be eligible for. So I'll touch on them at the end. So I think if you're a new business and you have hit the 75K in sales, and that was prior to 30 June, or prior to the lockdown period was announced, so the 26th of June 2021. I believe if you've got 75K in sales prior to that, you may still be eligible. If you haven't hit the 75K in sales, I think you won't be eligible.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that's been a big common question that we're getting with a lot of businesses that have started in that period. So I think that's been really good to clarify. Thank you.
No worries. Do you want to touch on the eligibility quiz that we've created, and then I'll keep going on with a couple of the other points?
Yeah, absolutely. So LawPath and Pop Business have created an eligibility quiz. We've shared the link in the chat. Chris will share that just again now, but basically, it basically gives you a very easy, I think there's 7 questions just to answer yes or no to. And if you're able to answer yes to all of those questions related to your turnover, your ability to keep employees on, there's a number of other considerations in there as well. It'll tell you if you are indeed available for this business support grant. And from there, we can put you directly in touch with Pop Business, who have a 48-hour turnaround for being able to assist with those during working days as well. So it's a good one to jump onto and have a go and see if that's going to be something suitable for you.
Cool, thanks, Tom. And so I suppose how we can help, so our job would be to find obviously initially to review your eligibility to make sure your business is eligible. Secondly, we'd do the calculation to find the highest percentage decline. So trying to get as close to that 70% or more if we can to increase your grant and assist with the accountant's letter. So as Tom mentioned, we'll, fast turnaround time. We're online, we've got expert accountants, and our sort of goal is to maximize your grant. And if nothing else, we hope that you definitely get some good information out of this and find this useful, and it equips you with the information you need to go forward and maximize your claim. It's really important to talk about the upcoming grants as well. So this one reminds me a little bit of the sort of like the JobKeeper that came out recently. They mentioned the cash flow boost, but it feels a bit more like the JobKeeper in a way, where it's got a similar sort of feel to the tests from this current grant. The details will be released late July for this, just to give you a heads up. So we will need to wait for the full criteria to come out, but the initial criteria that's been released is the 30% decline in turnover. If your revenue is between 75K and 50 mil, and you've had a 30% decline in turnover, they have mentioned to 2019. So I feel like it's pretty similar to the criteria for this grant. And if you maintain your current staffing levels, which is a similar criteria to the grant which we just discussed, you may be eligible for 40% of your payroll. There's a minimum 1.5K per week and a maximum of 10K per week. So even if you have employees and the amount's less than if 40% less than 1.5K per week, you'll get the 1.5 as a minimum, and it caps out at 10K per week. So that would equate to 100K in wages for the month. So that's quite a big one. For sole traders, the payment will be $1,000 per week, and you do need to have hit that 75K in sales. There is another grant for micro businesses. So just to be clear, the 75K is important to meet that, to get either the percentage of the wages with a minimum of 1.5K, or if you're a sole trader non-employing, you'll get the 1K per week. Details released the end of July, and my gut feel is this is going to be for the period that we're in lockdown. So it's going to be like a reimbursement, probably at the end of July or paid in the first week of August is my best guess. And we'll get information on that at the end of the month. But it's really important. I think the key thing, if you need to know anything, is you just need to maintain your current employee levels. So if you're letting people go because you've got no business, I think it's really important to watch the webinar tomorrow with LawPath and just make sure that you're really clear around how you can still be eligible for this from an employment point of view. So that's quite a big one. They haven't mentioned how long it will run for. If we stay in lockdown, I'd assume it's probably going to be like potentially rolling. And we'll see how we go. But so the first grant that I mentioned is that one-off payment. It's just a single payment, a boost. This one, it looks like it's going to be like a reimbursement of wages for the month of July and potentially the few days before July from when we went into lockdown. So that's something that's going to be coming out soon. It's called the Saving Jobs Grant. The other grant is a micro business grant. Now this is for businesses with a turnover of 30K and 75K and experience a decline of 30%. So again, details are coming July. This one will be $750 a week, so 1.5K per fortnight. And so if you obviously didn't hit the 75K, you can still access this. But you do need to have hit 30K in sales. There are some if your hours have been reduced and you're an employee, there are some other grants available for employees, etc. So if you don't meet 30K, might be worth getting some advice around, you know, can you still get any money? The answer is you probably can, but it probably needs a bit of work to go into it to work out where you sit. But this one's coming out late July, and it's covering off sort of, I believe it's going to be similar to this. And I believe, you know, if 2019 isn't a good test period, I think it's going to be similar, whereby you'll be able to elect substitute or alternative test periods that are more suitable to test the decline in revenue and how exactly you're impacted by the lockdown. So I might switch it over to Tom quickly. He's just going to talk about tomorrow's webinar, and then I think we'll run through some Q&A.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Pat. Yeah, before we get into a bit more an extensive Q&A, just wanted to quickly bring up that tomorrow we're going to be running part 2 of this series. So this next webinar that we're running through is with our LawPath legal lawyer, Damon Murdoch. Many of you would have known him from webinars that we ran last year as well during the lockdown period. So he's been studying up and helping a lot of our clients out with questions related to employment law and the different considerations that Pat has discussed around keeping employees on and the changes that need to be made around employment. In addition to, there's a lot of questions coming up around, you know, what am I doing around debts that I'm owed and chasing that up, and how am I dealing with my lease arrangements at the moment as well. So we put together this webinar as a bit of a part 2 of, you know, once you've actually got an understanding of what you're eligible for and the steps that you can take for ensuring that you're getting the maximum amount of grants that you are owed. The idea here is that Damon's really going to be able to assist with more the legal advice and the contractual side of things as well. So make sure that you're RSVPing there. As we've done with this, there'll be a presentation and we'll allocate some time to Q&A as well. With that in mind, I think we might now jump through, and we've got still a little bit of time up our sleeves, so we've probably got plenty of time to jump into Q&A. So Pat, I might start throwing a couple of questions your way. One that came up a couple of times throughout the presentation is, on the basis of which you can pick the turnover method. Are we talking cash? Are we talking accrual? Are we talking both? How is that going to set up? Can we clarify that for businesses?
Yeah, so the definition that they've mentioned for that is, I believe it's based on the GST registration. So if we just look at decline in turnover, the Australian Taxation Office goods and services tax concept will be applied when assessing an applicant's experienced a 30% more decline in national turnover. I believe it will be, so previously what happened is the grants were done based on your GST registration for the definition of turnover. However, they did have exceptions in the last one, whereby if it wasn't a good measure of the turnover for whatever reason, like you might have been delayed a payment for a period and you're on a cash basis, and usually your revenue is a lot higher and it doesn't make sense to use cash even though you're reporting on cash and your sales are way over 75, etc. So I believe it's based on your GST registration for your cash and accrual. However, they haven't released anything more than this. This is a definition they've released. I do believe there may be an exception allowed if it's not a good if it's not a good method to use to test, and there's a reasoning as to why it's not a good method. Like as an example, say you report on a cash basis, and as I mentioned, it's just the test period, it doesn't make sense to use cash, and it's outside of the ordinary business and the average income, and it just, for that 2-week period, cash doesn't make any sense. I believe you'll be able to use an accrual potentially.
Awesome. Thanks for clearing that up. That was a lot of questions that we got through there. So I think that's going to really help a number of people out. So I've had a couple of other questions come through that I think would be worth touching on now as well. One question that we've got is around, again, proving how your turnover has been impacted. And I know that you have referenced that there is the requirement of the accounting letters. There've been a few questions that have come through. Is that for all of the tiers available? Maybe if you just want to work through the process there and what's required in getting that sorted.
Yeah, definitely. So you do need an accountant's letter where so they've basically said within the application form. So after this step where you do your where you put in your income and you show the percentage decline, there is an upload button, and you do need to upload two things. One is to prove that you've hit the 75K for the period they want to see it for. The other one is the accountant's letter to verify that the accountant has tested and got to the decline in turnover, and that will include the amounts and the dates, etc. It does say for everyone, and it doesn't matter what tier, you do need to provide that for all the tiers. And I suppose they're going to be getting hundreds of thousands of claims, and they obviously don't have the resource and capability to manually check how people are working out what the turnover is, etc. So they've basically just, they've said if you get an independent accountant, tax agent, or BAS to do the decline in turnover, and provide us with a letter that they have, put in what the amounts are, the dates being tested, what the actual percentage decline is, etc. I suppose that's what they're doing. So if you do need to show a decline in turnover, which everyone does, you do need the accountant's letter.
Awesome. That's a really important thing to be able to acquire then. And a question that we're getting a few different kind of versions of, but basically talking about, expecting a decline in turnover post the 17th of July as well. So I wonder if you can just clarify that again for people, if they're expecting that due to the lockdowns that are now being enforced, that it is going to affect future revenues as well.
Look, I think for the purposes of this grant, they've made it specific, given that they've updated the closing date to be the 17th of July. Last night it was the 26th of July. So they've brought forward the test period. I think they've done that because people were submitting tests yesterday, and they had, from the 14th to the 12th to the 26th and stuff, and those days haven't yet come, so they brought it forward. I believe I think for this grant, they've just drawn a line in the sand and said, well, from this date up until the 17th, we'll give you, if you're affected, we'll give you this one-off grant. However, if you're affected beyond this date, we will have the upcoming grants to supplement you. So this is kind of like an emergency. Let's give these guys some money, because to draft the legislation for this, it's quite complex. So I think they've just tried to make this a bit simpler and easier to get it submitted and get the cash pumped back into businesses that need it. And then if you're affected longer than the 17th, as an example, you'll probably be eligible for these grants, which are looks like they're going to be like ongoing support, but we'll find out more at the end of July.
Yep. No, that makes a lot of sense. Thanks for clearing that part out. We've got a number of questions that are coming through kind of off a similar basis of that, and probably just worth confirming. This is probably a pretty easy one, but if you apply for one grant, how does that impact your ability to apply for future grants?
Good question. So it's totally fine to apply for this grant and the Saving Jobs grant. So it shouldn't affect future grants. The reason being is this grant is they specifically say, and I don't know if I've included it up here, which is text from their actual website. It basically is saying that this grant is to help businesses until, it's in the top line. So this will provide cash flow support until the job saver scheme commences, which it doesn't commence on 18th of July, but it's basically saying, we'll give you some cash now, but just beware that there is further cash coming. So this is kind of supplementing you for the time being for now, just so you can get some cash to keep things ticking over. And upcoming, you'll get more stimulus. And obviously the upcoming stimulus might end up being a lot more significant. As you can see, they're doing up to 10K per week. So you may be able to get 40K per month. So obviously that's much more significant depending on like if you have payroll and what sort of business you are. So it shouldn't impact future eligibility for grants.
Awesome. Thanks very much, Pat. We have had a couple of questions come through. I'm just trying to dig it up. There's so many questions that are flooding in at the moment around how, here it is, JobKeeper receipts. Are JobKeeper receipts included when factoring in turnover?
Just a quick one going back. So the JobKeeper and that, I don't believe they are included in the turnover because it is specific to GST related turnover. So if you're, given that the JobKeeper is all basically GST excluded, that's excluded income, I don't believe it will be included in, assessing turnover.
Great, fantastic. We're still getting a lot of questions around turnover, and I think a lot of people are specifically wanting to know how it applies to their unique circumstances, when their business started, and what that period looks like. What should they be doing, Pat? Where's the best place they should be going for some clarification around this?
Yeah, sure. So, and getting a couple of questions around the JobKeeper was to supplement. I don't. Yeah, it's a tricky one, and from the very limited information, they've got a one-line definition of turnover, and it does say per the Australian Taxation Office GST concepts. Sure, you can argue that it was supplementing turnover, but I think given you're testing 2019, in most circumstances, there was no JobKeeper back then, so it's kind of irrelevant. If you're testing the 75K in sales for June 2020, there is a potential, argument, but just based on the definition of them saying it is per the GST concepts of income, it may not be, but I can definitely research that and give you some information on that. And same with the Centrelink disaster payment. I believe that will fall into a similar definition for turnover as JobKeeper. So my gut feel is it's not, but we'll find out soon.
Okay, fantastic. We've got a couple of questions here that I think are probably going to be more suited for tomorrow. A lot of questions relating to what your rights are around standing employees down, what pay needs to be taken into consideration around that. So these are all areas that Damon is largely going to cover from tomorrow as well. Last question that's come through just recently: when your first payment in the year is after the 17th of July, can you spread it across the previous weeks? I'm not sure if you know.
Sorry, what was that?
So the question is, when your first payment / revenue in the year is after the 17th of July, can you spread it across the previous week? So I'm assuming somebody's got an invoice paid post 17th July.
Back in 2019, we're talking about,
well,
to try and increase the revenue back then?
I would assume so, yes.
So I believe that you could argue that it's not a good period if you meet the 75K anyway. But I don't believe, like, you can't spread it across. I mean, I think it is what it is. Like, if you received it, and if you invoice someone at a particular date, you can't change the date or spread that invoice, but you can potentially change the test period if it's not a relevant period to test. So I believe that's how that would work. If you do need more information, we'd be happy to help and do the eligibility and help you out with that. We do understand there's going to be a lot of unique scenarios, and at the moment, what they've released isn't that specific. So whilst we know a fair bit about it, when we get all these examples on the fringe, it does get a bit tricky because they haven't actually released enough information for us to be confident to say this is what this is, etc.
Great. So, I mean, on that same note, this might be another one that falls into that category, Pat, but I don't know if you know the answer to this. Maureen's asked, can you apply for the business grant if the business expense is a business car expense? I don't know if that would fall somewhere into the other operating areas, because I know that they've left that a little bit open.
I believe so. It's pretty vague. Again, it says business operating expenses. I think what they're trying to do is limit people from spending it on personal expenses and private in nature expenditure. And so if you have genuine business expenses, then yeah, you should be more entitled to spend it on business expenses. And if some of that is a vehicle to continue to do work, etc., you know, then that should qualify.
Great. I don't know if you know the answer to this one too from Marlene. It's a good question. Do business owners, specifically sole traders, need to meet the residency test for the grant?
The residency tests, sole traders, that's a good question. I'm not sure. Yeah, they haven't mentioned. The criteria is, do you hold an ABN and do you operate in New South Wales? And then if you meet all the other criteria, I believe you should be eligible, because they haven't specified that foreign residents aren't eligible. But if you want to get in touch, we could look into that for you as well, because it is something I would check, but it isn't mentioned in the guidelines that were released. So I think what we'd need to do is contact Service New South Wales for clarification around that.
Great. Just having a look and seeing if there's any other questions that have come through that we haven't got to. Good question here from Emil. Can a director owner who is also an employee claim the grants for the company and the COVID disaster payment as an individual? I'm not sure if you know the answers to that one.
Yeah, it's a good question. They haven't mentioned it, but I think the issue is going to be that I think you can, but I think the issue is going to be you can't claim the upcoming Saving Jobs grant if you're claiming the employee reduction in hours if you're a director grant. I think that's where it's going to be like you're double dipping a little bit. I think that's going to be, and they're higher. The one coming up, the Saving Jobs, if you're a director, I'd strongly wait for that one because it's a much bigger grant. The minimum is 1.5K a week. So if you hit 75K and you've had the decline, and even if it's just you paying yourself a wage, you might be eligible for 1.5K per week. I think the current one is 600 a week if you've had hours slashed by 50% or something. Don't quote me on that. I haven't looked into that one closely, but the difference is quite a lot. And so you'd be, it would be pretty annoying being disqualified from the upcoming one because you got the initial one. So I would seek clarification from Service New South Wales and just confirm that you can apply for the upcoming grant, and that the one you're currently on isn't going to exclude you from that. It doesn't mention, but that's my gut feel. Yeah.
And there's a lot of, I guess there's a lot of these kind of fringe questions very specific to everyone's individual considerations. So it's quite a difficult thing to answer specific cases on a public forum such as this. But I think largely it's been great to be able to give people a bit more clarification on a few of those areas. And it's obviously something where a lot of us are looking for some additional support and guidance. So really want to thank you for taking the time, Pat, to run through this with us. Where can people look to get in touch with you and your team?
Yeah, sure. So I think Chris has just hit a link in the comments. So feel free to do the eligibility test and get in touch. Another question, if the business operates in more than one state, is this just based on New South Wales turnover? I don't believe so. I think it's going to be your total turnover. And you may still be able to get it if you operate in New South Wales, but you're obviously, you might be in another state, so you still might be eligible. And another quick question, if you're a non-employing sole trader, do you still answer yes to the question, maintaining number of employees? I think yes, because I believe if you click no, you can't go any further. So I think that's just kind of a yes. And yes, correct. Info for micro businesses is not available yet. That will be released late July, to clarify. So late July, we'll get the saving jobs, the micro business, and you'll probably get reimbursed for the month of July. But yeah, hit the eligibility link that LawPath's created. Go through the questions, see if you're eligible, and if you need a hand, maximizing your grant claim and your accountant's letter. After you fill out your eligibility criteria through that link, you can shoot your details through us, and we can get in touch and try and get it turned over as quick as possible to get you your money back.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Pat. There's been so much to cover from today, and I think we've, been able to cover on a lot of the common confusion that covers this topic. And as more information becomes available to everyone, we'll continue to look to share and put on different pieces of content like this. So thank you so much for everyone for attending. So the next steps from here, as you may see in your chat now, Chris has just shared a link to our next upcoming webinar, where we're going to be covering up all of the legal considerations. From here, we will share with everyone a recording of today's webinar, where we've got all of the Q&A and Pat's presentation as well. If any other things that are coming through here, if there's more information that becomes available, we'll continue to share it with our members and everybody who's attended today as well. So keep an eye out on your inbox. We'll share all the information on how you can get in touch with Pat and all of the resources from today. But wishing everyone all the best for this Tuesday. Thanks so much for everybody who's been along. Thanks again to Pat for presenting, and all the best. We hope to speak to you soon.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, everyone.
Great.
Speak soon.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.